Yeah, welcome back to my class again today. In the last class, we did inner class. Today, we want to look at singleton class, right? Now, what do you use singleton class for? Singleton class is used for when you want to create just one instance of a class. For example, you have a database that an application is going to access. So you have multiple users using that application to access the database. But you want to create just one instance of the database for every user. So they are going to be sharing. Now, that is what singleton class is used for. So still looking at the concept of Adam and Eve, we created one object for the class man, right? And then it was from that one object that we now brought out the second object. We didn't have to create Eve the same way we created Adam. So that concept is what we are going to use now. So we are going to use singleton class to show you that concept. So without wasting much time, this is what we want to do. Singleton class, which is what? Creating just one instance of, of a class. That is what we are going to do here. So every time you try to create another instance of the class, it is still that first instance that was created that will be returned. That is all. So what do we do here? So I'm going to create a class, man, right? So I will create a class, man. And then in this class, the first thing I will do is to create a class variable, right? And I'll set that class variable to none. Okay, so I will say double underscore instance. You set it to none, right? You are setting the class variable to what? To none. Now, all along, when we want to create a class, the first method that you see inside that class is the init method. But in reality, it is not. The init method is the second method. Now, every class, right, is a child of an object class. So that object class is usually the parent class. You know, when they say, let us make man in our image, man was made in their image. So there was their image. So how many they were, we'll look at that later. So they created their image. Then inside that their image, that was where they made man. So they made man in their image. So man was a child of what? The parent class, which is what? Their image. So in reality, every class is the child of an object class. Now, inside that object class, there is a new method that is always used to create an instance before the initialization method is called to initialize the attribute of that class. But in all the ones we've been doing, I have never shown you that new object, new method. I mean, I've always shown you the init method. So that is because every time you instantiate a class, by default, you are going to inherit that new method to what? To create that object, that instance, in which you will now later call the init method to initialize by default. But in this case now, for us to be able to create a class that we can only instantiate once, we want to play around with that new method. So we are not going to use the default new method. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create an instance. We create a class attribute, which is what? This underscore instance, and we set it to none. Then we will now come here and we will say def double underscore new, right? Then inside it, we'll say class, and then we'll supply another argument to it, which is what? Name. And then we'll go in. So this is the new method that is usually called anytime we want to instantiate a class. But because it is always the default new method of the object class that we use, you don't see it. So implicitly, this is always called for us to create an object before we initialize. But in this scenario now, we want to play with it. Now we have called this new method. So we are, and this new method is expecting this one parameter, which is what? Name. Then we'll go in and we'll use the if statement. So we'll say if, right? If this, if CLS dot double underscore instance, which is this attribute, this class attribute, if this instance is none, right? If it is none, it means there is no existing object. Go in and create the object. So go in and then say CLS dot double underscore instance, which is this instance, right? Give a value. Call the super method, super function, yeah, super method. Now, I'm going to explain this. Call this super method and then say man, comma, CLS dot underscore new. CLS. So this super method, what this super method will do is to create a proxy object, right? That will delegate the method call. So at this point now, this super method is creating a proxy object for this man class. So that object will now be used to call this new method inside um, the parent class of this man, which is what? The object class. So meaning we are calling the default new method in the object class, right? Because it has checked, there is no method, that is the instance is none, meaning no object has been created for this class before. So because no object has been created for this class before, we are now going to call the default new method inside the object class, which is the parent class for this man, to what? To create an instance for this class. And then when that instance is created, it will now be stored here inside this attribute. Then we can now say CLS dot underscore instance dot name, which is an attribute that will hold this name, that will hold this name. So we'll use it to store. So at this point now, we have now created an object for this class because it has checked initially there was no object. So we have now created an object and it is now stored here, which is what? It is now stored in this place that was none before. So we now have an object created. Now we are creating an attribute name for that object to accept this one argument. That is what is done. Then it will return CLS dot instance, right? It will return this. Now we have created our class. So we are now going to what? Instantiate this class. So the first thing we will do is that we'll now come here. So this is the class. This is our class, right? So we are now going to instantiate it by coming here and we'll say Adam, right? And then we'll call the constructor, which is man, and we'll supply it with a name, which is what? Adam, right? Now, once this is done, so this Adam will come here. Instance is already set to none. So it will now come into this class. This Adam will be given to name. It will go in. When it goes in, it will check if CLS.instance is none, which is true. This is none. It will go into the if statement, and then it will say create an instance for this class. Using this per method, it will create a proxy object, which will what? Will give access to call this method. So that proxy object will call this method. This method will now create an instance for this class and it will store it here. Now, this CLS.instance name is an attribute that will receive this Adam. So this Adam will be given to this name and it will be stored here. So this one will return what? CLS.instance. So the object that has now been created, which is now stored inside this place, is what this will return. So now I can now say print right? Adam dot name, right? So this one will print out. This one will print out Adam, right? It will print out Adam. Now, if I now decide to instantiate, if I now decide to instantiate this class again by saying if, and then I'll call the constructor again man, and then here I will supply if to it. So what will it do? It will come here, and then it will come here. It will now give this if to name, and then it will go in. It will say if cls.instance is none. Now, is it none? No, it's not none, because at this point now, you already have an object that is created for it. So it will not go into this if statement. It's not going to call this. It will simply come to this return, and it will return whatever is inside that instance, which is already what? Adam. That is what it's going to return. So every time you try to instantiate it again, because it is not none, it's not going to implement this. So at every point in time that a different user is trying to access the database through the application, it is always that instance of the first database that was created that will always be returned. So that is how you use this singleton class to actually enable the creation of just one single instance. So at this point now, I can now decide to check by saying print. I can test by saying print Adam is if, right? If I say print Adam is if, this one will give me true. It will print out true. So I can only instantiate this class once. Every time I try to instantiate it again with another object, it will always return the first instance that was created. So this is how you are able to control this new method of the parents class, which is the object class, because every class that you create is an instance, is a child of what? Of the parent class object. So, but by default, this is always called. But because we want to use it now and control it, that is why we are bringing it out for you to see. So these are you create. So let's go to the PyCharm and allow me to demonstrate this for you to see how it runs. It's just going to print out, it will keep returning this Adam, right? So let's go to the PyCharm. These are PyCharm. Now let's create the class. So we'll come here and we'll say new file, singleton dot py. So here we will say class man, and then here we will say double underscore instance, assign none to it. Then we'll come here and we'll say define double underscore new, and then we'll supply class, and then we'll also give name to it. Then we'll come here and we'll say if cls dot double underscore instance is none, go in and then say cls dot double underscore instance, which is that one, sorry, right? Call the super method man dot cls dot double underscore new double underscore cls. So this is it. Now, having instantiated the class, so this superman cls is going to create a proxy object that will delegate a method call to this new, which is what? Inside the parent class, which is what? The object class. Now, here, once it is created, you can now say CLS dot double underscore instance dot name. Then that is the attribute. You will assign, you assign this name to it. Now you can now say return CLS dot double underscore instance, right? Now the class is created. So we are going to instantiate the class now by saying Adam, then we call the constructor man, and then we supply Adam to it, right? Then we can now say print Adam dot name. Now, when we come here again, so when we execute, if you execute this, it's going to print Adam for us. Can you see Adam? Now, let's try to instantiate it again by saying if, then we'll call the constructor man, and then we'll supply if to it. Now, when we try to run this, it's going to return Adam. So when we come here and we say print if dot name, it's going to return Adam twice. Then we'll come here and we'll say print, just to test, Adam is if. And then we'll also say print if is Adam. So when you execute this, you see, it will return, the first one will return Adam. When you try to instantiate it again, it's still going to return, you call this one again, it's still returning Adam. Then you're not asking it to check, is Adam if? You say it's true. So Adam is if is Adam. So with this Singleton class, you have been able to instantiate this object man, this class man, one time. So you are not creating if the way you create Adam. You are creating if from Adam, not the same way you create Adam. So every time you try, you are just going to, you have instantiated the class just one time, which is what? Adam. Every other time is what? You are just going to, the if that you created is the other polarity of the Adam, which is what? Male and female. That is basically it. So it will now allow you to create if again. Every time you try to create if, the same way you create Adam, is going to return Adam. That is why the creation of if was done differently, because the class can only be instantiated one time. So that is what I want to demonstrate to you in this class. If you like this class, please give me your feedback through the comment section. And don't forget to click on the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you have not done so. So, till we see in the next class. Bye-bye.